because the Shekinah, the light that covered their bodies left. We know that they were naked, that they were uncovered, and they made leaves to try and cover themselves, and that the Creator, as we discussed in week 3, which, like I said, it's really important to listen to the audio for week 3, the video, that the Creator took a shed snake skin and some goat's hair and some wool and fashioned a coat for Adam and for Hava. So we recognize that they knew for sure how God provided a covering for them, and that they didn't have to argue about what others claim God did. They claim that God had to kill animals and shed blood to provide a covering for them, and they make a premise, therefore you have to come to believe in Rabbi Jesus as the Messiah to be able to be forgiven of your sins. Well, that's not true at all. And that's not what God did. But it's based upon this false premise that they say God had to kill animals. I'm showing you very simply. And the sages teach that God took this snake skin and the goat's hair and the wool from the sheep and fashioned the garment for Adam and Hava. There was no shedding of blood. God had required that we do not shed blood, and again, blood was not shed until after the Noachide flood. So, they recognized that they needed a covering, they knew how God provided the covering, and they know that they had to confess their sins. You see, one of the really important things when we're talking about our failures, if you go to Vayikra 5:1 through 13, and if you look in the English, we'll see that before an individual can bring a sheep offering or 2 turtle doves or even flour, that the first thing they must do is confess their sin. And so, dear ones, Jews have always understood and believed that we must confess our sin. Now that brings us back to Hevel. Now Hevel, he sinned. What did Hevel do? Hevel brought an inappropriate offering to the Lord. He brought from the fruit of the ground. And specifically, our sages say that, I said Hevel. I didn't mean Hevel, I meant Cain. That Cain brought spoiled flaxseed and offered it to the Creator. Many years ago, I was doing a little shopping, garage sailing, flea marketing, and I came across this oak desk that had been painted. I think I paid like $25 for it. I was just so happy to have it. And 1 or 2, maybe 3 perhaps, members of my congregation at that time came to my garage, and we put stripper on it, and we scraped off the paint, and then we let it dry, and then we sanded, and maybe a little more stripper here and there. And eventually, we restored this oak desk to its original luster. It was just magnificent. It was beautiful. Well, I also had a business, and I wanted this desk for my theological library, for my study library in the home. And so at another time I had an opportunity to make a deal with an individual for a beautiful desk, an executive desk. It's gorgeous. And eventually when I sold that business, I wanted to keep my executive desk, but I had the executive desk and I had my just gorgeous oak desk. And one of the members of my congregation who came to the congregation later on said, "Oh, we need your desk so bad." And so I know that the desk that I was hoping they would take would be my executive desk. I wanted to keep my study desk. But when they saw the study desk, they had to have it. And so I gave it to them. That study desk was my favorite desk. It meant so much to me. And so when I gave that desk to them, I was really giving something that I cherished and that I really enjoyed, and that was very special. Now, you see the difference here with Cain is he was stingy and he was stubborn and he resisted God. And I hate to say this, but do you think perhaps many of us have somewhat, God forbid, the nature of Cain to a degree? I mean, here we teach on the internet, and thousands upon thousands of people, and literally over the last 20 years, millions of people have heard all the different things that we've offered and studied, and yet, just maybe perhaps 100 have ever stopped to even give anything. Now, we can't get into this thing about judging people, and we shouldn't make a major deal out of that. But what I'm trying to say is, if you really value the lessons, if you really appreciate the teachings, that should mean something. And if you treat them as if Cain, then you might benefit, but you're not really going anywhere. Because you see, it's really important when we give to be willing to give things that are precious to us, things that are special to us. And Cain, he didn't do that. He gave something he couldn't use. He gave something that only animals would eat. And so, as a result, the Creator rejected his offering. Now, when we look at Hevel, we see an entirely different picture. Hevel gave from the first of his flocks. It sounds like he's giving an animal, but he's not. He gave from the first of his flocks. And he gave from the choicest, the very best that the first of his flocks could provide. What am I speaking of? I'm speaking of the finest goat's hair, the finest wool, the most precious cream and cheese. This is what Abel gave to the Creator. And his menichato, his tribute, I could have said offering, his tribute was accepted. Now, we recognize that Cain was stingy. We recognize that Cain was self-centered and that he was throwing a tantrum and he was having issues with the Creator of the universe. The Creator came to him and he said these words. He says, Im Tetiv, and that means, Cain, if you improve, all will be well.